and welcome to Good Enough Chats. My name's Dan Bauscher and I'm the host and producer of the show. And before we jump into this episode, I just want to give you a quick heads up about what this conversation is going to be covering. So for this episode, I'm joined by Peter Shearman, and he's going to tell us about his story and his experiences with anxiety and depression and how that has had a massive impact on his life. He talks about growing up as an introvert, where the world rewarded more extrovert behaviours, and how that internal conflict between what he was expected to be and what he actually was eventually led to burnout. During the pandemic, he reached a point where he needed to go and find some help, which he describes as sort of almost like crossing a chasm, from feeling like he should be able to deal with it himself to getting some external help. He talks really candidly about what that period was like, the physical exhaustion, the spiral of shame, the trial and error of medication, and the slow process of learning to separate his sense of self-worth from some of the external markers that other people might use. This one really resonated with me. There are many parallels with my own experience, and I'm sure there are going to be lots of crossovers with other people's experiences who've been through similar things as well. Really interesting conversation. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Hi, Peter. How are you doing?
Well, Dan, doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Yes, I'm very good, thank you. I'm pre-caffeine, so apologies for that.
On a Friday as well. Goodness me.
I will warm up, literally warm up, and
That's
synapses will get flat.
all sorts of meanings.
Excellent stuff. So, Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. I know you're going to have a really interesting story to tell. But before we jump into all of that, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience, please? Could you go with name, where you live, age, what you do for a living? And also, I'm going to say, because I haven't had any breakfast yet, the single best thing that you have ever had for breakfast.
So here's where I stall for time on the breakfast question, because I've had a lot of good breakfasts. So Peter Shearman. So I live in Windsor with my wife and three not so young children. I'm 42. I work in technology. I spent 12 years working in Cisco, which is a big IT monolith out of the US. And I now work for a startup called Burble Transform out of Oxford. And I've always done kind of innovation and business development for those organizations. I'm not a technologist by background. I did politics at university. So I was smuggled into Cisco and from a think tank. And I've been in technology ever since. And my favourite breakfast, I'm a sucker for a full English, and there was one I had that did a combination of black pudding and white pudding.
As in grey pudding?
not grey pudding. Just they gave me a black pudding and a white pudding, and it was on toast, and they had salted butter. And so many places make the mistake of just giving you unsalted butter for the toast. And the tomato was actually cooked, and the mushrooms weren't overdone to the point where they shriveled down to nothing. And I can't even remember where it was. It was in a hotel somewhere, and I was very, very impressed. It's either that, or when you go to Scotland, they give you haggis for breakfast. And I just really like it. It's properly spiced, and the texture goes really well with the egg, and yeah. So it's going to be one of the two. That's not going to appeal to at least half the audience, I'm afraid.
Well, I really wish I'd had breakfast now. Two important questions about that breakfast. The one in the hotel. What was the bread? Was it sourdough? Was it toasted sourdough? Because
it was just farmer's loaf, just plain white.
Okay, so that's taken it down slightly in my estimation.
I do like sourdough. But I think, but for full English, I like the slightly sweeter white bread.
Mm. Okay, so haggis question. So the only time I've had haggis was when I went up to Scotland as well, and I had it in a variety of ways. I had it in a salad where it was fried, and then I had it for breakfast one morning where it appeared to have been boiled, fried or boiled.
On a breakfast, it's boiled,
Mm,
but
interesting.
from a chip shop, it's deep fried.
Deep fry. Oh, okay. Well, that's me going back to Scotland then. Uh, not tried that variant of it, but obviously I should have asked for that.
Everyone wants the Mars bar, but no, it's the deep fried haggis. That's what you want to go for.
I saw a video the other day of somebody who was eating a deep fried, uh, frozen deep crust pizza. Never seen something so monstrous in my life.
Not sound good in many ways.
No,
Don't
no,
do that.
no, don't do that. Don't do that. Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Right, let's jump straight into the first question then, which, as always, is why are you here today sharing your lived experiences of mental health?
So, um, to borrow a phrase, standing on the shoulders of giants, there are a number of people who I look up to, who have shared before, and were able to therefore help me when I was going through some acute phases. Um, Particularly a good friend of mine, Vicky de Blasi, who is extremely open about her own challenges and does an awful lot for people within her sector and in the industry on mental health, and is always very open about where she is at and her current experience, and finds that helpful and therapeutic, but is also puts it takes there's a toll on her for that, every time that you share and everything else, and but she keeps doing it because she knows that that's important, that someone out there could hear that, and and in this case it was me, and even though we don't necessarily share a common issue and causality, but just knowing that someone else has gone through that and was able to talk about what your journey is going to be, and what you can expect, and everything else is extremely valuable. That was what partly inspired my original post on LinkedIn, which is increasingly becoming Facebook for professionals. And I for one am all in favour of that because Facebook is terrible. But it's that inspired that, and then the opportunity to talk to you about it is an extension of that, for sure.
Awesome. And I don't know if you know this, but I know Vicky.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't know that. Oh, lovely. Okay,
in fact,
excellent.
like so, the organization that she started up is called the State of Us, which
Yes,
focuses on mental health in the PR industry.
correct. Yes, yeah.
Um, and actually, the first time I publicly in real life talked about my experiences was on a panel that Vicky was hosting at
Oh, lovely.
CC Group, PR agency,
Yeah, yeah.
and not in any way because of the environment, but just the act of talking about it. I absolutely broke down. I was on the panel with two other people, and I just burst into tears when I was talking about this stuff. And I thought at that point, I thought that I had it, that I was on top of it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until that kind of release of actually saying these things and answering questions from the floor, I was just like completely. But that was such a transformative experience for me.
And interviewee becomes interviewer. May I ask, did having had that, when you felt that emotion kicking in, did that encourage you to carry on with that exercise, or did you feel like you needed to withdraw from that?
It encouraged me to do it. You know, in part because I felt, I am here in front of all these people on this panel. I am midway through explaining this
Of
stuff now.
course, yeah.
I don't want to stop. Um, but what I realized was I had absolutely no qualms whatsoever about breaking down in front of a load of people to tell them the stuff that really mattered.
Yeah.
Um, and it was in part that experience was part of the kind of the catalyst for starting to do this. So yeah, I probably owe Vicky a coffee quite soon. Actually, we've sort of said, oh yeah, let's meet up, let's meet up. We've never actually managed to pin it down in the last couple of years, but yes, I'll do that. I'll give her a big hug, buy her a coffee, and say thank you. You are, pretty responsible for this conversation happening now. So I appreciate that. That's awesome. So before we kind of go into the journey that you've been on, I think it's really important that people understand that the mental health experience isn't a linear thing where, and I say this for people who haven't necessarily experienced this or maybe starting to experience something like this for the first time. It's not like, oh, I was poorly, now I'm better, everything's fine. It's more like this, isn't it, than this straight line. So
the roller coaster.
Yes, yeah.
Some of them have very low troughs, and some of them are all right, and it's a loop the loop.
Yeah, it's like the radio frequency waves on the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I like to check in with people and ask, how has your last week been in terms of your mental health?
My last week has been fairly positive. I try and divorce how I feel about myself from my successes and not professionally and otherwise. It doesn't help me to internalize things too much. So if we win, that's great, and if we lose, that's great. It's just part of it. We were talking off air about the fact that I now have an MCL strain in my knee, and that's surprisingly that took me out of it, because I started to invest in myself as a runner, and now I can't run. I can barely get up the stairs. And it's funny, little things like that just kind of maybe sets you back a little bit and whatnot. But on the whole, it's been a good week, yeah, I'm on a fairly even keel, which is great.
Awesome. And I know we chatted offline about this, but as a runner of some years, that I know exactly how that feels when you kind of feel like I'm doing this thing because it's good for me. I know I'll get like the physical benefit, I'll get the endorphin benefit of all of that stuff, and then all of a sudden you can't. And it's very frustrating. And you know that it's very your kind of level of fitness will drop very quickly when you're not doing the running. But this is why I've kind of started to see the whole kind of running experience as less about the target is important, because if that's the thing that gets you started, but it's much more about making sure that you enjoy the distance from now until that start line, which for you is going to be the London Marathon, right?
That's the aim. Yeah. Knees willing.
Which is absolutely huge. And on that day, when you get there and you're doing that run and you're surrounded by tens of thousands of people who are also running it, the one important thing that you've got to remember, and you can remember this every time you get up early or you go out after work in the winter and it's dark and bleak and bloody miserable, is you're still doing something that most people in the country wouldn't do. So you are still, by doing anything like that, you are still doing something that most people will not do. And a lot of those people will choose to not do that as well. So you are still doing something which is awesome, even if it feels crappy at the time, even if you feel like you're slow, even if it hurts, you are still doing something, and you've got to give yourself credit for that.
Excellent. I'll take that. Thank you, Dan.
I'll find a more pithy pep talk and I'll do you a voice note. Great stuff. Okay. So let's turn to your mental health journey and how your relationship with your mental health has evolved over time. And with this one, I think it's important to say you can start this from wherever it starts because, for the benefit of the audience, I don't find out about the experiences that the guests on the show have had before we record. And I do that deliberately because I want my reaction to be real. Um, so, if this is something that's like been triggered by a particular incident in the last couple of years, go with that. If it's something that you can trace back much further, you start wherever you want to start, Peter. Your story, you're in control.
Wonderful. So I sought treatment for anxiety and depression during the pandemic. Must have been about 2021, one of the on around now. And that was a kind of acute point. But I can trace it back now. I understand it. This is a childhood thing for me, and it's a personality type thing for me. So I'm an introvert. This surprises a lot of people that know me, but it's because I've figured out how to be an outgoing introvert, which was a big part of the battle. And it took a long time for me to figure that out and work out what exactly me, personality-wise, I was. A book by Susan Cain called Quiet, The Power of the Introvert. I've read as a bit of a middle finger up to a former boss of mine who said I should read some self-help books. And so I read that one, and he was like, "Couldn't you read like seven habits or something?" Or maybe some Dale Carnegie. No, I think this probably identifies with me more, and it did, and it explained a lot about my, the physiology and biochemistry of introversion and some of the characteristics and traits that how that manifests. And anyway, what became very apparent through that exploration was that growing up, I and many others like me were presented with a kind of extrovert ideal. If you're I was relatively smart at school. Anytime a teacher asked a question, I knew the answer. I never put my hand up. And so it always been, why don't you put your hand up? You know the answer. Why don't you put it? Well, yeah, as an introvert, I can either participate or I can listen. I can't do both. If you want me to participate, I'm thinking about participating. I'm not thinking about what you're saying. So as a kid in the classroom, I'll keep my hand down because I don't need to answer the question to learn. But that's just very poorly, and it's maybe slightly getting better now, but it was very poorly understood. Like, you need to participate more, you need to speak more, talk more. And that just wasn't my nature. And so all through like your childhood, you're getting these things that kind of make you doubt the way that you intuitively are. And there was a moment, I did psychology at A level, and I remember we all, the entire class, took a Myers-Briggs test, type indicator for where you sit. We were learning about personality, and the entire class except me answered the questions in the way that they all came out as an extrovert, and I only came out as introvert by 1 mark. And that was just the cumulative weight of the type of expectations that were on us during that period, that everyone thought that's how they should be, not. And that other part of it, and I know I wasn't the only introvert in that class. There's a good chance at least 35% of us. So, but everyone was being, the cues you were getting was to deny your internal self. And so that, I feel like that's kind of a root of my anxiety is linked to kind of that the self-esteem element that kicks in when you're being told to deny who you are for just your entire developmental time. So that's kind of how I trace it back, so that anxiety has always kind of been there. Whenever I was in social situations or at school, basically anywhere, I always had a level of social anxiety, and I dealt with that through narcissism when I was growing up. I had a very narcissistic tendency that would kick in as a kind of defense mechanism for that. Like, if you don't really care, if you as a person don't care how everyone perceives you because you're a narcissist, then it doesn't matter that they don't agree with who you are. So that narcissism kind of protected me as I was growing up, but then that was just completely taken apart at university, and that was not how you could be in civilized society. You can't be a narcissist unless you want to be president of America, which is different.
Unless you're an actual narcissist.
Unless you're an actual narcissist, in which case you don't really have a choice about it, which is somewhat ironic, I guess, when you think about it. Um, but yeah, but I had that kind of, I don't care, blah, 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 nothing matters, blah blah. I'll be me. But then that kind of dissolved at university, um, and I used to get a lot of the physical cues of anxiety, the twitching and the itching stuff that will kick in. And then that kind of carried on through early career phases until I then got to the point of self-help, and started to understand a little bit more about me and find a little bit more validation in me, and a little bit more understanding about my friendships and relationships and the like. And that kind of allowed me to be a little bit more comfortable with it. And actually, I had some very good years, and anxiety wasn't really a problem for me, for a number of years, from kind of my probably late 20s onwards. Um, and But then I got into a situation at work where I had too much on me. The expectation was too high. I had too many responsibilities, and I didn't handle that very well. I didn't do what you're supposed to do. The people pleaser in you just tries to do it all and carry on doing it, and it wasn't working. I had to work. I felt like I had to work all the hours, and it's one of those things that you don't. No one asks you to do that, but it's a personality that you feel like you have to, and you've got to do these things.
Yeah.
It's not the case. And sometimes you have to look at ourselves and go, okay, can I take a bit more control of that? And I didn't. And actually, there was the Christmas that followed that. Yeah. It's not emotion. That's just a frog. And at the Christmas, I sought a GP referral for diabetes because I was constantly dehydrated and I was falling asleep all the time. Just anywhere. I sat down, I would just gone out for hours. And the GP was surprised that I was coming for a referral, but then when I told him my symptoms, he was like, okay, yeah, well, let's actually just get you tested. And it was negative. I didn't have diabetes. But what I did have was most likely adrenal fatigue because I've been going through fight and flight response every single day, all day. And that's not what that system is designed to do. It's borrowing energy from the future, and eventually you've got to pay it back. And in my case, by just falling asleep. And that, self-esteem takes a tumble and stuff because you're not doing things you're supposed to be doing. You're not looking after yourself. You've got no perspective, no balance. And I ended up taking. My director noticed, and we had an arrangement where I would take a day off a week to just try and get some normality back, try and get a bit of separation. Looking back, that's a bit of a half-assed answer that the pair of us came up with. The answer should have been have some proper time off, go and see somebody, right? And let's get you well, rather than let's keep working and try and muddle through. Here's a bit of extra time for you where you're just going to be sitting there thinking about all the stuff you should be doing. So without addressing the responsibility, it wasn't really addressing the root cause of what was triggering. Eventually, we did an opportunity came up to reassign me into a much more comfortable working setting. So we did that, and that the release, the lift of that burden, kind of allowed me to regain a sense of equilibrium. So I should have sought treatment then. I didn't. That's a mistake I should have done. But it put me back into a kind of position that I knew I was comfortable with, working with people I knew, and that was okay. And then that was probably about that was 6, 7 years before the acute episode that I actually did seek treatment for, where during the pandemic I got moved to a US reporting line. Cisco's a big company, um, and it was disempowering. The disempowerment that I felt really then played into the self-esteem issue. I'd always worked with UK-based leaders and directors, and just being that far removed from decision making, from power was very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable with new people in a new organization I didn't know. The pandemic had hit, half the world was on furlough, like the business and economic context was pretty awful. And I thought, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to provide for my family again.
Mm.
And that's obviously that's a big overreaction to it. But at the time, that's how I felt. And I don't know if I'm going to be of value to my family anymore. I don't know if my skill set is ever going to be relevant again. I don't know if I can, if Cisco aren't just going to turn around tomorrow and say, well, we don't need this bit anymore and the world's changed. And that kind of, that catastrophization about my prospects and my value I can't be, it's looking at it from a purely economic perspective, but then thoughts go through your mind like, well, my life assurance is pretty good at Cisco, and that's a pretty dark thought to have. But I distinctly remember having those when I was trying to take a walk, trying to get some air, trying to just recover a bit of sense of self. And I was just meddling through, just hating the prospect of talking to my boss, and looms so large. It was once a week, and I had to just try and muddle my way through, and I would get to that meeting, and I would do everything I could just to run out the clock on it, and like nothing valuable, nothing strategic, nothing to try to bring them into what I was experiencing. You're just pure survival mode at that point, just trying to get through to the end of the day so I can go to sleep. And that's what I was trying to do. Doesn't make you a particularly good and present father, didn't make me a particularly good and present partner, husband, and it was very noticeable in the house that I had no life in me at that point. It wasn't very. I wasn't participatory. I wasn't there emotionally for them. I would do stuff, but that's very different from being involved in stuff.
Yeah.
And so eventually I said to my wife, I need to go and talk to a GP. There must be something I can do to feel different. Sure, maybe this does happen to people like me. And because if you haven't sought treatment before, that's kind of the first step of acknowledging that is a really big deal, to go from it's just something I should be trying to figure out, something I should be able to cope with, something I should be able to do, versus actually maybe something I get some help with. And there's a chasm you cross when you do that, like mentally.
I think especially for men, because because our default is to try and fix things.
Yeah.
Just accepting that you can't fix this yourself is a huge step forward. I don't want to sort of derail your conversation, but there's a couple of things I just wanted to ask you about. Number one is an observation that when you were talking about that sense during catastrophizing during the pandemic. So will my skills ever be needed again? Am I going to be valuable to this organization? I was immediately struck by how many people must be feeling like that right now because of the rise of AI as well. There's a whole load of people who are going, will my job exist? What do I need to do to have a job in the future and provide that? So I don't necessarily think that we can say that you were catastrophizing with the benefit of hindsight, but at the time, it was the unknown, wasn't it? We didn't know.
It was a huge looming darkness about, I've no idea what this looks like.
Yeah.
No certainty at all. That is what it felt like. Like, no, I wouldn't even know where to start planning in that scenario.
And it's and loads of people are now, across every sort of level of an organization are kind of going, is a machine going to replace me? Right. Entry level jobs, mid management jobs, the whole piece. I think people will be able to relate to that completely. And I'm not going to ask you, what's the solution to overcoming that? Because I don't think any of us know that yet. But I think it's a very understandable and relatable response, is what I'm saying, to the circumstances that you were in. I did. So you said when you kind of got switched, your boss noticed, and I think credit needs to go to your boss for noticing. The resolution might be slightly clumsy, but they noticed and they tried to do something to help, which I think is more than you would get in a lot of organizations, right?
Yep. Yep.
But my question for you is when you were moved into a different role, initially, that was more comfortable for you, you said you didn't go to get treatment then. Why didn't you get treatment then?
Because I was seeing what was happening to me as a function of the job, not as a function of me.
Yeah.
Now, there are plenty of people who would have been in the same situation as me that would have dealt with it very differently. If you were truly in control of what was of you and your state there, you say, you know what, this isn't workable. We need to have a proper sit down and think about how you reassess, how we give me responsibilities that actually work, that don't mean I'm going to burn out. And if you were choosing to see that as something just unachievable through a more objective lens, then you would solve that very differently. I was internalizing it as, well, actually, there's an expectation I should be able to do this, so I should try and do it.
Yeah.
This is my job, and if I can't do it, it's a function of the job, not that it's impossible to do, but it's me, and I'm failing in some way, and I'm not viewing the way I'm feeling about that as a function of, well, you have anxiety and depression, you idiot, sort it out. I'm seeing it as a function of, well, I'm not able to do the job, so of course I'm stressed about it. And then when I came out of that, like the weightlifting of that, like just brought a calmness back to me. I could nap during the day to recover my energy from that period, for a little while, and it would normalize, and the relief was, the best medicine at that point, and so because I was normalized, so I think it was viewing that as a classic man trap of, I should be able to sort this out. I should be able to figure this out myself. It's on me to do that, not, well, maybe you've now been pushed into one of those scenarios that happen to other people because it's happening to you, which is, this is burnout. This is something that is, happens to people, and you are one of those people, or one of people actually, because it hasn't anyway. I'm fairly sure, but yeah, it's viewing it through the wrong prism.
There is so much about what you've said that is really, really familiar to me, and my own experiences. It's really, I think you've done a really good job of explaining that to others. I haven't been able to find the words to explain that feeling to other people. I've tried, but I think it's a very difficult thing to convey and a very difficult thing for people to relate to if they haven't had that feeling themselves. It's
Yeah.
You can see that people are struggling, but you still can't quite get your head around why. And what you said right at the outset about kind of personality types and your makeup, I just go, oh my goodness me, it's like a carbon copy. Not to dismiss your experience at all and say, well, I've been through that
Oh,
as well, but
well,
the
it
opposite of
should be
that.
relatable. It should be the point. It
Yeah,
should be because it's, I'll say, this is typical. It's not
yeah,
atypical. And this is the point about talking about it, because it is typical. And others will go through it, and it will be very familiar and very similar, because it's the context of modern life.
yeah,
It's not a, and that's okay. That's part of what I'm keen to share, because this is, yeah, okay, bit of personality type stuff, and right, yeah, burnout at work. Yeah, everyone has either been there or seen someone going through that, for sure. It is typical.
yeah. It is. It is. Sorry, I derailed your story with a couple of those questions. Then I think you'd got to the point of saying that you wanted to go to the GP to help you to feel different or to help you to deal with how you were feeling. We'd kind of got to that point in your
Yes,
story.
you did. That's right. So yeah, in my mind, I was like, there must be a pill somewhere that's going to make me feel better. That was the simplistic survival mode in my mind. Was going, oh, like some sort of sedative or something would be tremendous right about now, just to take the edge off feeling like this all the time.
Mm.
Um, so, well, yeah, the optimist in my in my depressed self was after a quick fix. Um, so I went to talk to, so I made an appointment to talk to the GP, and it was GP was very good about it, was very professional about it. They'd seen this a lot, was thankfully empathetic. It's not, you may or may not get that with a GP, and depending on, anything else. But I think, on the whole, they will try to be, um, and they see a lot more of this now than they would have ever done in the past. And so they said, look, I'm going to send you a questionnaire, the self-reporting scale, and let's see what your scores come back at. And came back very anxious, very depressed, etc. And as they said, right, look, well, here's how we address this. We can do three things. We can put you on a 6 weeks kind of CBT counseling exercise. Great, sign me up. We can put you on anti-anxiety medication. Great, sign me up. And we can give you some propranolol for kind of one-off moments that have kind of high trigger potential for you, high anxiety for you. And so, yeah, great, give it to me. Now, just to warn you, right, when you start taking the SSRIs, they're going to make you feel worse. I was not, I'd heard that, but I didn't quite know what that meant. How can you feel worse? I don't want to be here anymore. How do you feel worse? But you do. You do. And so the first time you're taking and I can't remember which one. I now take citalopram. I can't remember what the first one was I was on. It didn't work for me long term, so I had to switch it off. But as you're building up the dosage and getting it in your system, you do feel worse. And the crushing sense of shame from no good reason that would take over you anytime you felt like you'd done something wrong or weren't quite right or perfect was really, really very, very tricky to deal with. And actually, and it's interesting that sense of shame, it was a big part of the symptom I was feeling. Cool. So at that time, I put my hand up to coach a new football team for my son to play in. Because there were a bunch of kids on a waiting list at the football club, and no one was there to do it. And I can play football. I have my coaching badge and stuff, so okay, I'll do that. And we were too late to enter a league in September, but we could enter one in January. and I got an email from a guy at the club and said, "Have you managed to get your team in a league yet?" And he kind of miswritten it because it wasn't my job to do that. As a club secretary, he was supposed to do that and everything else. But receiving that email and the fact that it was something that I suddenly felt I was supposed to have done and I've not done it properly, oh God, it sent me into a shame spiral for about 3 days. And I couldn't even look at the email to try and get it sorted out. Now, that's a simple phone call. Phone call to the club secretary to say, just want to check, have we registered my team yet? Oh, okay. How do we do that? Do we need to get that in? Is it a form that goes into the league? Do you do that form? I'll do that. Do you want me to call the league? It's not hard to sort out. That's an easy resolution. It's just a thing that has to be done. But the shame spiral that sent me on, I couldn't even look at my inbox. I was just right in the chest, like getting me. And that was at the time I was taking taking these things to try and get well again, to deal with things like this. Um, and because I was doing it in a personal capacity, it wasn't kind of through work. I was still working, which, in hindsight, that probably wasn't smart. I should have been given a couple of weeks off to sort myself out. But I was in a kind of, I had my American boss and I was in a bit of a hiatus. I was trying to find a way to get back to the UK and it was all a bit of a mess. And so I didn't really have anyone I could lean on internally. And it's just no fault of anybody's. It's just it was where I ended up. And so I was still working and working while you were getting that treatment. I had a couple of meetings where some things hadn't quite worked in a project, and people were saying, "Well, has your team sorted this out and done this?" And they hadn't. And again, just that shrinking feeling internally, like oh God, this is me. This is shame. This is no, I've done it wrong again. And just that knot that tightened the chest and everything else. And it was yeah. So that period, with hindsight, I would have taken. I should have. You should insist on getting time. I'm surprised the GP didn't say that.
I was
No
going to say,
issue.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised upon reflection now that that wasn't part of their prescription for me. And eventually, you had to go through it a couple of times because the first one didn't work for me. I started to feel better and I felt worse again. So then we switched out medications and I had to try another one. So that's 4 to 6 weeks of trying and failing to land on the right medication and the right dosage to make you not
And,
feel those things.
and each time, again, I can relate to this. Each time, was that shame spiral. I don't know about you, but I'm very good at picking up on what I haven't done and what my shortcomings are. So to have an email like that land in your inbox when you're already feeling at your lowest, it just validates your belief that you're utterly useless and incapable of doing anything, doesn't it? It just makes the weight of the world just somehow gets heavier on your shoulders. Like, I can't get anything right. So to then know that the medication that you're taking isn't the right one, and then you've got to start that cycle again. Just that in itself is an enormous psychological burden and absolutely exhausting. It must feel exhausting going through that cycle.
That is exactly what it is. And my wife has a very good understanding of these types of issue. And basically, look, just go and lock yourself in the bedroom, right? Don't be around the kids. Don't put pressure on yourself to be there for them. Like then, it's a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. Then, in the grand scheme of their lives, they're not going to notice. Right? It's fine. Right? You'll be here for the rest of it. Right? But go and be just don't have any responsibility here. Go and be upstairs. Go and be away from it. They'll come and see you. They'll say goodnight, and then that's all you need to do. And so I did. I literally locked myself in the room for weeks while it was the biochemistry was sorting itself out. And I worked from there, and I would keep the video off, and it would just be the minimum amount of calls, minimum amount of work, and then distractions. Distract, and until I can go to sleep again. And then as you got to the right level, as you start to step up the levels of the dose, I started to feel more like how I felt during the good periods, when
Mm.
I figured out myself and was finally understanding who I am and how to relate to the rest of the world. And yeah, okay, this is good. Okay, starting to get back to it. Um, but yeah, that is a bit where actually you have to take more care of yourself because you've got to you have to you have to see that through. Right, you have to. It's no good starting that process and going and then stopping again. Like, this is it. This is the way to reset your brain chemistry in a way that's going to be helpful for you. So you have to just ride it out in whatever way you can with whatever support you can, and then because it will eventually, they'll land on something that will work for you. So that was fun. I mean the propranolol, just to share my experience of it. I don't know whether it worked particularly well or not, but as a placebo, sure,
Mm.
why not? Okay, I've got a big thing coming up with the VP of this country or the VP of that organization. All right, let's just try and take the edge off it. Why am I taking one of these? Okay, great. Then at least I can tell myself it works.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, anything that was kind of helping to just talk my brain into taking a bit of the load off was not a bad idea at the time. Um, and then there was the CBT, and that was good. I got I don't do everything talk that we talked about, but I still keep some of it. It's like when you go professional training at work, right? If you take one thing away from that course, then you implement, then it's probably done something good.
Mm.
So some of the things they talk through, the catastrophizing was a good one. Okay, if you think you got something big coming up, half an hour before, just write down all the ways it can go wrong, horribly wrong, stupendously wrong. Right, write them all down, and then just throw that in. You've done it now, right? Your brain is catastrophized. You've got all that out of your system. I don't necessarily agree with getting out of the system per se, but the act of seeing it all and going, it's actually never going to be as bad as any of that ever. It's okay, and just right, okay, and I can go in and I can lead with my opening about the weather and how it is where you are, and just go in a much calmer and a much more me sort of place. And the gratitude diary stuff was also very helpful. The idea of, okay, at the end of the day, write down the three things that you're grateful for, the three things that you've achieved today, that you've done today. However big, however small, doesn't really matter. And actually, I started to take that back into my team at work. I started, actually, the gratitude point that's actually just emotionally really, really healthy anyway. So we started doing the kind of teammate of the month thing where your vote only counted if you told me why that person got your vote, as a display of your gratitude for them, for the things they do for you, for the team, for themselves, for customers, whatever, don't care. The point is you had to display your gratitude. And so I found that really helpful just to kind of calibrate at the end of the day and go, okay, like whatever else has gone on today, I'm still grateful for the fact that there's a roof, there's a family, there's friends, and I'm grateful for the situation and stuff like that, and just trying to get the brain to feel some kind of endorphin-like effect from that just offsets any of the negative that might have impacted my health through the day.
Mm. Interesting. It's interesting because I've never found I've never found I've been able to stick to that kind of stuff. Um, I find it very easy to not do it, even though I recognize the potential value in it. But what
I
I
should say I don't do it the way they taught me to do it. I don't sit down and write it. I don't have a diary. But it's a mental process now.
got
So trying just to remind myself to go through that exercise. And there is value in the writing, the pressure on pen and paper, and psychologically and everything. But uh, I like you. I wouldn't stick to that if I had to do it.
yeah, yeah.
And right, as as an action, but just the mental steps just help me to recognize the things that I'm going through a little bit. And so that's how I use it.
Do you know what I've started to do recently? And this was probably within the last couple of months that I've found supremely helpful is a version of that, but what I'm getting better at is I'm better at catching myself when I start to think the negative thoughts, when I start
Yeah.
to let the feelings of doubt wash over me. I'm starting to get better at spotting when that's happening and literally talking to myself to counteract it. So I've done this on the dog walk. I've done this when I've been running. And it's amazing how small the things are that I'm basically saying to myself, not what have I achieved today necessarily at the end of the day, but often it's at the start of the day. I'll be saying to myself things like, right, well, you've already got up and you've walked the dog, so you've gone outside. You've already picked up the dog poo off the floor in the lounge because the dog's so that's good. So no one else has to deal with that. You know you're going to be having a call at 9 that you're ready for. And you also know that by the end of today, you would have done these 3 things as well. So that it's, and I can't tell you how just talking to myself, sometimes literally, sometimes in my head, pointing out the positive things or the proactive things that I've done or that I am going to do that day has helped me to recalibrate and pull my head out of where it was going and set it on a more constructive path. Now, as with all these things, I don't know how long I'll sustain that, but it's absolutely in my interest to sustain it and to give it every best chance. And I just wish that it hadn't taken me until the age of 46 to actually buy that and do it. Because the cynic in me would have gone, yeah, it sounds like mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. But interestingly, it's not too divorced from my narcissistic tactic as a youth.
Interesting.
Because and because it tips over from I can do all these things to I'm really good at these things and doesn't matter what people think. The trick was I almost had it right. I just tipped much into overconfidence
Right.
and self-belief rather than being rooted in what I'd actually done. But the overcompensation for was to think I'm the best thing since sliced bread, and it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. But that was again rooted in kind of trying to give myself confidence in me in the day and what I'm going to do. Is rooted in the same, trying to find the same answer. Just I got the wrong part of it. But the idea of that kind of internal pep talk is very much where that came from.
Mm.
As a treatment, as a coping mechanism for it. And a much better way is the way you're talking about it, to go, no, actually, root that in the real, and you're halfway there. Right? These are the things that that you have added value to today already, and this is how you're going to achieve the rest of the day. All right,
Yes.
and that's good enough.
And sometimes those positive things could literally, I mean, I joke about the dog poo thing,
That's very real.
but it's true. Like
Yeah,
I've gone down there, I've gone into the lounge first. The dog's had an accident. I've cleared it up. I've made the room smell nice, so someone else doesn't have to deal with that.
yeah, yeah.
What is more, say not humiliating? It's the wrong word. The word escaped me. I should have had more coffee. Um, but yes, it's a leveling, a grounding
Yeah.
experience, but you've still done it, so someone else doesn't have to do it, um, and that's a positive. Um, Next question I've got for you is about those kind of key light bulb moments. You've talked about going to the GP, you've talked about the CBT experience, changes of medication, and I'd sort of asked you, that earlier on why you didn't seek out the the treatment, the support earlier. But what kind of has happened over this period that has been a real sort of moment of recognition for you that either there were things that you needed to start doing, or that there were things that you needed to stop doing that were going to help you?
Um, so I think I mean, the big moment is acknowledging that maybe there's something that you could get some help and treatment with. I mean that it the until it happens to you, it's only ever happened to them. And and is there just something different about the people that suffer from these types of condition? And and it doesn't happen to you. And that I'm I may well have held that perception. Um, Not necessarily intending to, but definitely the cues that you would have been given, um, about mental toughness and everything going through, even when you become more consciously aware of these things, and maybe you can logically acknowledge that it could happen to you, still at an emotional level, you probably don't think it could, think it will.
Mm.
Um, and um, so I think that's why the stigma is really important to address, because even if you can reason that yes, anyone in any particular any walk of life could end up being a sufferer and could be put into positions and so on, that still doesn't mean you're going to acknowledge that, and I could be one of those people.
Mm.
And I think there are a number of people who just did not know this about me, who now do, for whom that is, I wouldn't have thought that, which is meant harmlessly, but is also and it is it's not a problem, but it does reveal minds as well. Why wouldn't it happen to me? Could be anybody. This is literally how this thing works. And um, so what I've taken from that, as terms of what I there's things that are for me that individually that I now stay away from investing myself too heavily in the outcomes of what I do.
Mm.
I And maybe that means I give a little bit less. I try not to mean that I give a little less of myself to it. I'm a big believer in you put your personal stake in what you do. And that's really important. It's part of your personal and professional credibility in anything you do. You should commit to it. Um, but I'm trying to base my self-worth on whether I've made good decisions and taken good actions, not on whether that's led to a win or a loss, or an account gained or account lost, or whatever. It's more about those are outcomes that are beyond my control. There's lots of other factors involved that I can't whereas previously I might have hung my hat on the fact that, well, yeah, I'm very successful, I win these things, and if I have a row of losses, that dents my confidence. Well, no, you're still very good at what you do. Win or lose, you're very good at what you do. And just be happy with that, and know that you did the things that you know you need to do in order to put yourself in a position to be successful. And if it didn't work out this time, that's poker. Sometimes someone's got a better hand. Sometimes and the something random falls on the river, and that's it. And so just trying to take more, just trying to recognize my value is in the process, not necessarily an outcome I can't control.
Mm.
And and so that helps just to, I'm not, I'm the high and the low of that. You forego some of the high, but you forego the low, and I'd rather forego the low. And if you have the high, other people are going to enjoy the high. That's okay. I can vicariously enjoy it through others who are happy to ride that wave, and comfortable riding it, and that's fine. That's for them. So I try not to do that. I also I want to. I think it's allowed me to be more empathetic. I think. The others probably a better judge of that, but certainly it's what my brain has now become, is to just acknowledge more of the person behind in any conversation that I'm having, in any activity that we're going through. Like, I've certainly, since I've had this, I've certainly checked in on more people who, maybe I've sensed a different level of energy from them, or I just want to check, is everything all right? Didn't seem quite yourself there, or is there something going on? Can I help? So just trying to be more aware that it could be anybody, right? And recognizing when people might be in bad positions, and starting to get into a hole. Can you do something to support that? I think I've tried to be. I enjoy the adrenaline of getting stuck into big things, right, and dealing with big weighty stuff and whatnot. That's been my job, and I do it. But I also now allow myself more recovery time.
Mm.
So, life of a salesperson, life of bid management. Sometimes it's all nighter, sometimes it's two, and I'm happy to do that. I enjoy that pressure creates good output from me and whatnot, and I enjoy the responsibility. But I also the recovery time is important. You can't go from that into something else. I have to now allow myself, if it's been high on adrenaline, I've got to do some mundane stuff. I've got to do some admin. I've got to just take a day off. I need to be aware that it's like a pro athlete. You can't go from 100-meter race to 100-meter race. You have to let the body recover. And the same is true of peaks and troughs of commercial activity. You have to do the same. If it's been an intense week, it needs to be a cheaper week, right? It needs to be a 10 to 4. It needs to be a day off. You're just going to veg, go for a run, don't go for a run. Doesn't matter. Just let it get out your system before you invest in the next thing. So yeah, those are the things that I now do as a matter of course. I'm much kinder to myself and my schedule, particularly around those kind of big ticket items that demand a lot of energy from me.
Mm. It's interesting because the value in the process thing, that's basically what I was saying to you about the running at the start.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Make sure you carry that over to the running 100%. I'll help you. But also I think there's a narrative that I think is common to anybody that's going through or goes through burnout and anxiety. You said earlier about feeling like you needed to work all the hours, but no one's telling you that you need to work all the hours. I think that's because, well, in my instance, it was because I really cared. But actually, in reflection, I cared because I didn't want to feel like I was the one that had cocked it up or that got something wrong. So I felt like I needed to be on all the time so that I can minimize the chances of me being the one that had made something go wrong. Um, and actually, the narrative that I think people often tell themselves, this is one for the interviews, right? I thrive under pressure. Well, that's good. I mean, I told myself that for decades. I thrive under pressure. But what I wasn't doing was what you've now learned to do, which is, yeah, but I can't do that all the time because that's not the way that stress is meant to work.
Yes.
It's meant to work as a threat response, isn't it? But it's not meant to be on all the time. It's meant to be balanced so that
Yes.
you're not constantly on edge, high alert, unable to sleep, unable to concentrate because you're so preoccupied with everything else. When I think that's something that I want anyone listening to this to really sort of take from that. That if you say to yourself you thrive under pressure, the only way you can truly do that is by making sure that you are consciously deciding to not be under pressure at other times as well to balance that thing out.
Absolutely. 100% that. Yep.
This has been a really interesting conversation, Peter. I think there's an awful lot in here that I know other people resonate with this because I am. It's all so many bells are ringing in my head at the moment about my own experience. But if somebody hears this and they've been and they feel like they're going through something similar, but perhaps they're earlier in the journey, they haven't sought the help, they are you before you took the steps that you've subsequently taken. What is the most important thing that that person can do based on your experience?
Thing I didn't do that I wish I had is even before I sought treatment, shared with someone that I knew had gone through. And the reason for that is when you're going through it, your mind is not, you're not clear. There's a fog in there. And we talked earlier about the clumsy, half-witted measure that my boss and I came up with. I was really grateful for that.
Mm.
It was a day away from the stresses of the workplace, and I really, really valued that. But objectively, that's a poor solution. But I can't tell that when I'm in that state. I'm looking for a way out. And so what someone who's been through it before might be able to offer you is an objective sense from experience about what you really should be getting and should be doing at this time. They can almost be a kind of pseudo advocate for you in that process. Like, the GP not giving me time off. That's weird. Said nobody to me.
Mm.
Would have been helpful if I'd been talking to somebody who could say, they're not giving you any time off. Like, it's, your score is really, really low. You probably shouldn't be working. Right. And so where is there's no one to help you through that process unless you go and find someone who understands it. And I have people, we've talked about Vicky and she's an incredible advocate for all sorts of people. So that really could have been something that would have helped me sooner. But yeah, anyone that you feel like you could confide in who could then give you advice from their experience, so you know what you should be entitled to, because everything you get is going to feel like a little win, even if it's wildly insufficient. You're going to just grab it like a drowning man grabs a floating piece of wood. So actually, I don't need a floating piece of wood. I need a life raft, and a life raft with a way of signaling somebody to come and get me. Like that's so. Don't just grab onto the first stick that's going to take you over the waterfall. Right? It's what is it that's actually good for you, that's right for you in that situation. Yeah, that from my experience, that would have been really valuable. I did share when I was getting treatment and I was going through it and I was on medication and people were, and others were saying how, their experience and everything. But even before I got to that stage, I think, and what to expect, an advocate friend would have been extremely helpful.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, I think although it's hard to hear, somebody that's been through it who can be honest with you about what lies ahead as well, because your sort of description of how the medication made it worse. So a GP said, well, it will be worse initially, but you didn't know what that meant.
No.
If you'd been able to speak to somebody who could have said, right, this is what happened to me, you can ready yourself for it. Or, I'm aware that when I say in a lot of these conversations about the non-linear nature of recovery from some of these episodes, that's a tough thing for somebody who's in the mire to hear. So, oh, what do you mean? It's going to take years, and it's not going to be just progress. There's going to be times when I fall back. That's hard for someone to hear if you're really in a trough. But it's really important that I personally value that kind of honesty and openness when other people are telling me stuff, because it allows me to go, okay, I've got to buckle down for this. There are going to be times when I feel like I'm on the other side of it, but then I get dragged back. At least if I know that's going to happen, then I can try to let it affect me less when it does happen than perhaps it would do otherwise.
That's it. Like because if you acknowledge that, well, actually, it's not me doing something wrong. Recovery hasn't failed just because I'm not feeling my best right now. That's just part of the recovery. I'm okay today, and tomorrow I hope I'll be okay as well. But you never know, and that it's all right if that's the case. Like you have your strategies, and you will feel. You do the things that work for you, you'll feel better again, and you'll carry on. But it's not progress. It's just the course. It's meandering. It's non-linear. And you have to find peace with that.
Yeah, brilliant. Peter, thank you so much for doing this today. I really, really appreciate it. I know I've said it a couple of times already, but this is going to strike a chord with people 100%, and someone's going to hear this that needs to hear this, and that means this is invaluable. Just to have this out there is huge. So thank you so much for agreeing to do it and sharing your story. Thank you also to our audience, whether you're viewing or listening to this. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it with people across social media channels, ping it to them on WhatsApp, email it. Just the more people this can get in front of, the better, the more chance it's got of helping people. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a review, because again, that helps to get this in front of more people. By all accounts, it doesn't matter what you say in the review. Obviously, nice things would be appreciated. It's the star rating. So the more 5-star ratings we get for these conversations, the more people can discover it and the more people it can help. This has been an awesome conversation. I'm really pleased that we've added this one to the bank of chats that we're growing with Good Enough Chats. If this has resonated, please check out the other conversations, because there are plenty of really interesting, useful discussions that are being added to this all the time. We'll be back again soon with another episode. In the meantime, look after yourself. Thanks.